Hey, so I've just been watching the paranormal thriller film Final Destination. If you know the film, there's a whole series, of course. I'm really into the series, but this isn't going to be a film review. I'm just mentioning it because the first Final Destination, of course, opens with a plane crash. Now, the angle of this video isn't going to be about premonitions and all that sort of stuff, although it's certainly an interesting subject. I may focus on that for another video. But it kind of got me thinking about aviation safety. And I've done a little bit of research, very, very basic research, albeit from Wikipedia. But the thing about Wikipedia is it isn't the most comprehensive source, but it's better than nothing, and it still gauges a sort of idea. So what I've done is I've focused on not worldwide aviation incidents, but just the United States as a, let's say, template. And in order to simplify things, what I've done is looked at the last three presidents and I've looked at aviation accidents during their tenures. Now, forget the politics, it's not about that. It's just to kind of provide a sample of time periods, that's all. So, from 2009, January '09 onwards, that is the Obama presidency, I've worked out that there have been four or five major aviation incidents involving fatalities, and the total number of fatalities have been 81. The most serious of which was the 2009 New York plane crash, in which about 50 people died. Now, during the Bush era, from January 2001 to January 2009, there were seven major incidents with 370 perished, and I'm deliberately not including 9/11 in that because that was a deliberate man made act of terrorism. So I'm talking purely about accidents. The worst such incident, though, was the Queen's plane crash, which was in October or November 2001. And in that period, seven major incidents, 370 dead. Now, in the Clinton era, from January 93 to January 2001, I worked out there were 10 major incidents with 616 dead. So you see the trend there. 81, 370, 616. It's got nothing to do with the presidents, but I'm just using that as sort of time periods to work with. If we look at some other statistics and some other facts, if you look at aviation in the 1970s, let's take a typical year, 1974, the number of major aviation incidents were very high. There was probably a major, and by major I mean, let's say, 30 plus fatalities incident, certainly once a month, if not more. Um, to kind of put that in context, this year there have only been two aviation incidents with more than 40 fatalities. One was in Russia, in Irkutsk, and the second one was an Egyptian plane crash, which crashed off the coast of Cyprus earlier this year. Now, that's not meant to be insensitive to those who perished, but it puts things in context. Every year there are thousands and thousands of flights. Millions of people travel by air. The vast majority of aviation fatalities where they do occur are in private jets and are individual incidents. In the UK, we have one or two every year. But actually, major aviation incidents involving large numbers of fatalities are still very rare. And even when major incidents do occur, more often than not, there's a lot of people injured as opposed to people perished. This isn't consistent. I mean, there was that period from 2014 to 2015 where did seem to be a bit of a spike in the number of aviation incidents. And I think there was a lot of focus on that with the events around Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 and then later Flight 70 being shot down. But again, with the plane shot down, no, we still don't know whether it was Russia or rebels. But in that incident, again, that was man-made interjection. So if we take that out, some recent major incidents have been the first Malaysia Airlines incident, which still hasn't been solved. That's one of the great aviation mysteries of all time, actually. And the Alps plane crash last year are two that come to mind. Um, other major incidents. There was the Air France disaster in 2009. There was the Sao Paulo plane crash in 2007. So there are some that stand out. But the point I'm making is that if you actually look at the statistics, aviation is incredibly safe. And I'm making this partly because it's an interesting subject, also partly to maybe try and reassure people who do have flight fears. Because when we see something on the news, when it gets attention, I think the reason it gets attention is because it is so rare. I mean, far more people die on the roads than in the air or in trains or even at sea. I think maritime incidents get less coverage than either aviation or train incidents, but even that is still considerably less than road fatalities. Um, to give an example, in the UK, it's approximately 2,000 people die every year on our roads, and that's a low figure compared to some countries. In other European countries, in Italy, it's around 7,000. In the US, I believe it's up to 50,000. And in China and India, it's around 100,000. So road fatalities continue to be a much, much, much bigger killer than aviation incidents. Um, I think it's the idea that if you're in the air, there's absolutely nothing you could do. Whereas in a car crash or a train crash or even a maritime incident, you've more of a chance of survival because the environment gives you some sort of buoyancy. Whereas in the air, well, that's it. Although there have been aviation incidents with lone survivors. So it is an interesting subject. But freak accidents or accidents of this nature really are very rare. And that's not to say that they never happen. Sometimes fate does happen, and not just with aviation incidents, with natural disasters. I remember there was a volcanologist who famously said he was in dangerous work and I could die tomorrow. The next day, Mount St. Helens erupted and he died in 1980. So obviously, people involved in dangerous work have a higher likelihood of being killed. But if you consider it this way, as passengers, some people are frightened of flying, but consider the pilots. They fly pretty much every day as their job. And they could work for 30, 40 years, never see a single incident, and that would probably be the norm. Probably the most they would have to contend with is a drunk passenger or two. So I think it is extremely important to put things in context because, and I'm not bashing the media for reporting these things. I think, if a big tragedy occurs, of course it should be reported. But we do have to put things in context. And the world is really not quite as dangerous as we believe. I mean, Final Destination actually does relate to this point because if you know the series, it's about death stalking people. And it's all based on kind of freak incidents, usually transport accidents, um, you know, DIY incidents, this sort of thing. Um, and whilst accidents do occur, I mean, I've been in close run incidents. I was cutting my hedge last year with an electric cutter, and someone called my name, caught my attention, and I wasn't paying attention, and I cut through the cord, big puff of smoke. Now that could have electrocuted me, and it did shock me at the time. Not physically shocked me, but took me aback. Um, so there isn't really much we could do about that. We can't go around like Alex Browning, the character in the film, kind of constantly being on the guard for danger. Because even if you do that, you could be a victim of a terrorist attack. And there's absolutely zero way to know about that unless you report someone behaving in a suspicious way. But if a suicide bomber is going to blow up a transit train, there's pretty much nothing you could do about it. And I'm not saying that to scaremonger, I'm saying it because I think we have to just relax and get on with life. There are people in dangerous jobs. There's emergency personnel, police officers, firefighters. There are soldiers. There are people who are in risky sports like boxing, etc. So there are people who are in riskier jobs. There's fishermen who often have to brave very tough conditions, electricians. So there are people involved in tough jobs. But even people who ostensibly have very calm lives could find themselves in one of these situations. So instead of worrying about it, I think we should just get on with life. Doesn't mean that Final Destination isn't an interesting series. If you haven't seen it, check it out. And that's my topic for this video. Thanks for watching.